The briefing room smelled like recycled air and old decisions I had been in. Enough of those rooms to know what they meant. They meant someone above you had already chosen your future and was now performing the theater of explaining it. I sat in the third row, my unit 9. Soldiers, one field medic, and Kowalski occupied the seats around me like a collection of people who had learned not to expect good news. We were right. Colonel Vasari stood at the front. Behind him, the display screen showed a star map I did not recognize with 2 territories marked in red and blue, pressing against each other along a border that looked like it had been drawn by someone who enjoyed suffering. I pulled out my notepad. Old habit. Paper pen, the kind of thing that did not run out of battery when everything else did. The compact liaison stepped forward. His name was Vithori, non-binary Dravathi. Species roughly the height of a tall filing cabinet with skin the color of old ashen eyes that moved independently of each other, which I had been told was a sign of high intelligence in their culture, and which in my opinion was a sign that I would never fully relax around them. Vithori began speaking. The translation unit on my collar converted it into flat, precise English with a half-second delay that always made conversations feel like talking to someone just slightly too far away. The fourth conflict, Vithori said, has persisted for 107 of your years. The Dravathi sovereignty and the Salkin collective have engaged in continuous territorial dispute along the Vorth Ridge, a 600 km border zone of significant strategic value. The Galactic Compact has maintained observer status throughout. 11 million soldiers have been committed. The current front line sits within 4 km of where it began. I wrote that down. 4 km, 107 years, 11 million soldiers. I wrote it down because I needed to see it on paper to believe it. Vasari took over. He was the kind of officer who believed in tone. He believed that if he spoke with enough gravity, the words would feel heavier than they were. Humanity's admission to the Galactic Compact comes with obligations, he said. We have been assigned a sector of the Vorth Front, 12 km of line. Our contribution will demonstrate our capacity as a member civilization. Someone in the back row asked how long. Vasari said, our deployment timeline is generously structured. We are expected to maintain commitment for approximately 100 years, at which point our sector responsibility transfers to the next admitted civilization. The room was quiet in the specific way rooms get quiet when everyone is processing the same information at different speeds. I finished my math on the notepad. I had written one line, a single curved line arcing around the shape of the Vorth Ridge as displayed on the screen. Behind Vasari, around it, not through it, not over it, around it. I folded the notepad twice and put it in my chest pocket. Vithori was watching me, both eyes at once, which meant something significant. In Dravathi body language, I did not know what. I did not ask. Vasari continued speaking. He used words like honor and responsibility and contribution. I have nothing against those words in other contexts. In that room, they tasted like the recycled air, like something that had been breathed before. I thought about the Kepler skirmish. I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds, which is the amount of time I allow myself, and then I stopped. The compact admiral addressed us near The end, he was Solara class, a species I had only encountered in documentation. Tall and thin with a voice that came out. Slightly musical, he said humanity would be stationed alongside Dravathi units, already embedded in the sector. He said we would receive full operational briefings on arrival. He said the Vorth conflict was a matter of civilizational significance. He did not say we were going to win it. He did not say anyone was. After the briefing, Vasari found me. The corridor, he was the kind of man who could read a face when he tried, and right then he was trying. Asimensa, he said, you look like you have something to say. No, sir, I said. You have that look. I always have this look, sir. He studied me. 100 years is a long time, he said, but we take it one rotation at a time. Yes, sir, I said. He walked away. I put my hand on my chest pocket, felt the folded notepad through the fabric, and followed the rest of my unit toward the transport bay. Kowalski fell into step beside me. He was from somewhere flat in the middle of the country, had forearms that belonged on a larger person, and laughed at things other people did not find funny. He was the best soldier I had ever worked alongside. I would not tell him that. 100 years, he said. That's what they said. You doing the math thing? I already did it. He looked at me sideways, and I folded it up. I said, it's a Thursday problem. He nodded like that made sense to him. It did. We boarded the transport. The star map on the briefing screen had already been replaced by departure logistics. The Vorth conflict waited several light years away, patient as everything that had stopped expecting to end. I sat by the port window. Stars moved past in the slow way they do when you are traveling fast enough that slow is relative. 11 million soldiers, 4 km of net movement, 107 years. I pulled out the notepad. I looked at the line. One line curving around the ridge. I put it back. I closed my eyes. I did not sleep. The front was quieter than I expected. That was the first thing I had prepared. For noise, for the constant percussion of sustained engagement, for the kind of sound that gets into your teeth. What I got instead was something rhythmic, organized, almost musical. The way that very broken things sometimes are when they have been broken long enough to establish a pattern. We arrived at Sector 7 of the Dravathi line at dawn local time, which meant the twin moons of the ridge system were still visible on the horizon, and the light came in at the wrong angle for human eyes. Everything looked slightly off. Shadows fell in directions they should not have. The landscape itself seemed uncertain about its own geometry. Captain Alara Ford met us at the transport pad. She was our advanced liaison, posted 3 months ahead of our main deployment to study the front. Ford was 32 precise and had the particular kind of exhaustion that comes not from lack of sleep but from watching something senseless for too long without being able to say anything about it. She shook my hand. Her grip was the grip of someone holding on. How bad? I asked. She thought about it. You need to see it first, she said. Words don't do it. Right. She took us to the observation ridge at 600. We lay flat on the permafrost shelf and looked down at the valley below. The Dravathi units occupied the eastern slope. The Salkin occupied the western slope. Between them was a flat, open span of approximately 400 m, marked on both ends by fortified positions that had clearly been rebuilt many times in the same location. The ground between those positions was churned and gray. At 6:12, the Salkin opened fire on the Dravathi eastern position, not a suppressing fire, not a flanking attempt, a direct frontal barrage aimed at a fortified wall that had been there for, by Ford's account, at least 60 years. The Dravathi returned fire at 6:14, same direction, same targets, same pattern. By 6:40, both sides had expended significant ordnance, both fortified positions were intact, the front line had not moved. I watched Kowalski beside me. He was very still. His face was doing a thing I had never seen it do. His mouth was slightly open. His eyes were moving back and forth between the two positions in the valley. Then he started laughing. It was not a loud laugh. It came out of him slowly, like pressure releasing from something that had been sealed wrong. He pressed his face into his arm, his shoulders shaking, and Ford looked at him with an expression that said she understood completely and had done the same thing 3 months ago in private. I did not laugh. I counted the munitions crates stacked behind the Dravathi position. There were a lot of them, neatly organized, well-maintained. The supply system for this engagement was clearly efficient, which meant someone was moving considerable resources to ensure this specific exchange could continue indefinitely. That was the piece I kept turning over. The logistics, someone was supplying this. Someone was manufacturing those rounds and shipping them across light years and stacking them in neat crates so that this valley could continue to not change. Ford walked me through the official engagement data over the next 3 hours. The Dravathi and Salkin had between them attempted 47 major offensives over 107 years. Every offensive had been aimed at the ridge. The ridge was the defined strategic objective. Taking the ridge would give either side a commanding position over the valley supply corridor, which fed both civilizations. Forward stations. Nobody had taken the ridge. I asked Ford why. She pointed at the ridge. Because the ridge is fortified, she said. Both sides have spent a century fortifying it. Attacking it directly costs more than any temporary gain is worth. Has anyone gone around it? I asked. Ford looked at me. The eastern face, I said, past the Dravathi secondary line. There's a gap between their flank and the ridges. Natural drop, maybe 600 m of exposed ground, but it connects to the Salkin rear supply corridor. Ford said nothing for a moment. That would violate the compact engagement protocols, she said finally. Rear supply interdiction is a restricted tactic under the Vorth Accords. The Vorth Accords are a compact document. Yes. Written by the compact. Yes. Who assigned us here? Ford rubbed her face. Yes. I wrote nothing down. I already knew where the line on my notepad went. I had known in the briefing room. That afternoon, Vithori arrived at our forward position. They had been assigned as our compact liaison for the duration of our deployment, which meant they were responsible for ensuring we operated within established parameters and for filing reports when we did not. They greeted me with the double I focus that I still had not decoded. Sergeant Asemensa, they said, you have questions? I always have questions, I said. Right now, I have one specific one. Proceed. Why hasn't anyone attacked the Salkin? Supply corridor. Vithori was still for a moment, not thinking about it, more like a person who has been asked a question they know the answer to, but had hoped not to be asked. That is not how the Vorth conflict is conducted, they said. I looked at them, they looked at me, one eye, then the other, then both. With respect, I said, that is not an answer, that is a description of a habit. Vithori said nothing. 11 million soldiers, I said, 4 km of movement, 107 years. Has anyone ever asked why? Vithori looked out toward the valley. The evening engagement had begun, right on schedule, the same barrage, the same return fire, the same result. From a distance, it looked almost ceremonial. The Dravathi military caste, Vithori said quietly, has structured its entire economy around sustained conflict. 3 generations of their population have never known peace. Their culture assigns meaning to sacrifice in this specific theater. The Salkin are similarly structured. Ending the Vorth conflict would require both civilizations to rebuild their entire social architecture. I listened, I let it settle. And the 11 million, I said. Vithori did not respond. Were they told that? I asked. When they were sent here, were they told the war was the point? The evening barrage continued below us, patient and precise, hitting the same walls it had been hitting for longer than I had been alive. Vithori turned away. You should eat, they said. The next engagement cycle begins at 400. I went back to my tent. I took out the notepad. I unfolded it. I looked at the line for a long time, one curve around the ridge. Not elegant, not complicated, obvious. The way things become obvious once someone draws them. I picked up the pen. I began writing. Not a letter, not a report. A proposal. Kowalski found me at midnight still writing. He looked at the pages. He looked at me. He pulled up a crate and sat down. This what I think it is, he said. Depends what you think it is. He read the first page, then the second. He put them down and looked at the wall of the tent for a while. They're going to say no, he said. Yes, I said. They're going to say no twice, he said. Probably 3 times, I said. He nodded slowly, and then I folded the pages, put them with the notepad. And then it's a Thursday problem, I said. He almost smiled, almost. Outside, the night was quiet in the way that places get quiet when they have stopped expecting anything to change. I was not planning on being quiet. The first rejection came from Major Gideon Hale, our immediate commanding officer, who read the proposal with the expression of a man watching a car drive off a perfectly good road into a field. On purpose. He said it violated 6 compact protocols. He said it would destabilize the established engagement framework. He said it was, and I am quoting him directly, aggressively creative in a context that does not reward creativity. I thanked him for his time. The second rejection came from Colonel Vasari, who had clearly already spoken. With Hale, Vasari was more diplomatic. He said the proposal showed excellent tactical thinking and that in a different context it would merit serious consideration. He said the Vorth Accords existed for reasons that extended beyond battlefield efficiency. He said humanity was new to the compact, and new members did not immediately rewrite the rules of every room they Walked into. I asked if he wanted me to file it, formally or just discard it. He paused, then he said, file it. Formally. That was the tell. Vasari had more going on behind his eyes than his speech had suggested. He knew what formal filing meant. It meant it existed on record. It meant it could be retrieved. 2 days later, Ford came to find me. She had the look of someone who had done something she was not certain she should have done. Vasari forwarded it to the Compact Strategic Review Committee, she said, and they rejected it in 14 minutes. I said nothing. 14 minutes, she said again, for a proposal that took you 11 hours to write. They did not read it. I looked at her. Vasari filed a field authorization request this morning, she said quietly. His personal authorization. He is putting his career on it. I did not say anything about that either. I put my hand in my chest pocket. The notepad was there. Vasari called me in at 800. He was standing at his field desk, looking out the narrow window at the valley where the morning engagement had already begun, same as every morning, same as it had been for 107 years. He did not look at me when I entered. Field authorization is approved, he said. You have operational latitude. Within Sector 7, you will not receive compact endorsement. You will not receive Dravathi cooperation. You will likely receive a formal inquiry afterward. Yes, sir, I said. You have 48 hours, he said. After that, I have to file a status report, and I will have to describe what happened, which means whatever you plan to do needs to be done. He looked at me then, just for a moment. His face said several things he was not going to say out loud. Understood, sir, I said. I went and got Kowalski. We had 11 soldiers and 1 medic. We had our standard field equipment. We had the element of complete surprise. Not because we had done anything clever, but because no one in 107 years had tried what we were going to try, which meant there was no defense prepared for it. The plan was not complicated. Complicated plans are for situations with more time. The Salkin supply corridor ran behind the Western Ridge face, feeding their forward positions through a series of relay depots spaced roughly 40 km apart. Those depots were not fortified. They were not fortified because no one had ever gotten near them. The Vorth Accords prohibited rear supply interdiction, which meant the depots existed in what amounted to a protected zone, not by armor or defensive position, but by 107 years of everyone agreeing not to look directly at them. We were going to look directly at them. Kowalski had been studying the terrain maps for 36 hours. He found the gap I had marked on my notepad, the 600 m of exposed ground along the eastern ridge drop that connected through 2 km of rough terrain to the backside of the Salkin line. Exposed, yes. Watched, no, because watching it would imply someone might use it. We moved out at 200 on the second day. No announcement. Ford Snorts watched us go from the perimeter edge. Her face was unreadable, which was its own kind of answer. We crossed the exposed section in 18 minutes. Kowalski set the pace, which was the pace of someone who understood that hesitation and speed have the same enemy. The terrain beyond was rough in the specific way of places that have been ignored, not destroyed, not defended, just overlooked. We moved through it without incident because incidents require someone to be paying attention. By 3:40, we were positioned 300 m from the first Salkin relay depot. I looked at it. It was large, well-stocked, the kind of infrastructure that takes decades to build and assumes it will never need to defend itself. I gave the signal. Kowalski looked at the main access structure. He looked at our transport, which we had requisitioned without asking anyone, and which was heavy and fast and had been designed for a different purpose. He said something about physics that I did not fully follow. Then he drove through the wall. The actual wall. The depot's internal power collapsed in 4 minutes. Their communications array, which was routed through the same power infrastructure, went with it. The first relay depot was offline before the Salkin Forward Command knew anything had happened. We moved to the second depot, then the third. By 600, the Salkin Eastern Supply corridor had been severed at 3 points. Their forward positions were running on stored reserves. Their communication with rear command was fragmented, routing through backup systems that had not been tested under actual load. I stood outside the third depot and watched the horizon. The morning engagement in the valley would be starting. The same barrage, the same return, except this morning the Salkin side would be firing from a position that was already hollowing out beneath them. Vether voice came through my communication unit. Controlled. Very controlled, in the way of someone who is not feeling controlled at all. Sergeant Osmansa, they said, what have you done? I was looking at the coordinate map I had spread on the ground. The notepad was pinned to one corner of it, one line around the ridge. I did not answer right away. I thought about 14 minutes, the time the compact committee spent rejecting 11 hours of work. I thought about 4 km of net movement and 107 years. I thought about the name of Vether, brother, which I did not yet know. I went around the ridge, I said. The communication unit was quiet for a moment. Then Vether said, the Salkin Forward Command is issuing contradictory orders. Their units do not have protocol for this situation. I know, I said. The Dravathi are attempting to resume the standard engagement cycle. Vether said their command structure cannot process what is happening. They are filing the morning barrage as scheduled. I know, I said. This is, Vether started again. Sergeant, the Salkin Eastern Command has opened a frequency, emergency contact, first direct communication with Dravathi High Command in 107 years. I looked at Kowalski. He was eating something out of a field ration pack. Like we were on a training exercise. He raised his eyebrows at me. Tell them we're listening, I said. By hour 23, the valley below had gone quiet. Not the quiet of preparation, not the quiet between barrages, the quiet of something that had stopped, like a clock that has been running so long. Note 1 in the house remembers winding it, and then one morning it simply does not tick, and the silence is so complete it wakes you up. The Salkin had not fired a single round since 800. The Dravathi had fired 3 scheduled, automated. Then their own commanders had halted the cycle because firing at a front that was not responding was a very different thing, and even a command structure built for ritual had enough logic left to notice the difference. I was in the forward operations shelter, which was a generous name for a pressurized tent with 2 folding tables when Vether walked in. He looked like a man who had aged in a non-linear way overnight. He sat down. Across from me, he did not say anything. For a while, the Salkin have requested formal ceasefire negotiations, he said. Yes, sir, I said. Ford had told me 40 minutes ago. They have requested that human representatives be present, he said. Yes, sir. The Dravathi High Command has not formally agreed to negotiations, he said. They are in with the compact. Liaison is calling an internal deliberation period. I knew what that meant. I had known what it would mean before I drove Kowalski through any walls. They don't know what to do with it, I said. Vether looked at me with winning. With stopping, I said. He was quiet again. Outside, the valley held its unusual silence, like something fragile, like it was not sure how long it was allowed to last. The compact has filed a formal objection, Vether said. 18 counts. Protocol violations, unauthorized tactical action, breach of the Vorth Accords, destabilization of an established engagement framework. He paused. Among others. How many is among others? 11, he said. 29 total. 29, he confirmed. I wrote it down, not because I needed to remember it, because writing things down is what I do when I am trying to keep the volume in my head at a manageable level. Vether watched me write. They are also, he said, in something. In his voice shifted quietly through a back channel that I should not know about, and therefore do not officially know about, receiving contact from 6 other compact civilizations with what are being described as complicated situations they would appreciate human perspective on. I put the pen down. How complicated? I asked. The kind that have been complicated for a long time, he said. I folded the notepad, put it away. Outside, someone was moving equipment. The specific sound of things being reorganized, rerouted, redirected. The sound of a system trying to figure out what to do when the thing it was built around stops being the thing it is built around. Vether entered. They stood at the entrance of the tent for a moment, both eyes doing the independent thing, and then they came in and sat down. They did not greet anyone. They looked at the table. The Dravathi Military Council has convened, they said. It is the first full council convening in 31 years. The last one was to commemorate the 80th year of the conflict. What are they deciding? Vether asked. Whether to participate in negotiations, Vether said, or to decline and request the front be reinstated. Can the front be reinstated? I asked. Vether looked at me. The Salkin supply corridor requires 6 to 8 months to rebuild at minimum, they said. The forward positions are operating on reserves that will last approximately 18 days. So no, I said. Not militarily, Vether said. The Dravathi Council is discussing the political framing of that reality. Vether made a sound that was not quite a laugh. I looked at Vether. They were very still, stiller than usual. I had been watching them for days, and I knew the difference between their ordinary stillness and the stillness that meant something was happening under the surface. Vether, I said. They looked at me. What does the council decide in your estimation? I asked. A long pause. The tent fabric moved in. The pressure differential from the shelter circulation system, a small, quiet movement, nothing like the sounds of the valley below for the last 107 years. They will negotiate, Vether said. They have no other viable path, but they will do so in a manner that preserves the narrative of sacrifice. They will reframe the conflict's end as a strategic culmination rather than a collapse. They'll call it a win, Kowalski said, from the back of the tent where I had not noticed him until he spoke. They will call it a completion, Vasari said. Kowalski made a sound of acknowledgement and went back to whatever he was doing. I filed my after-action report during the first hour of the ceasefire proceedings, sitting in the back of the formal negotiation shelter while compact representatives and Dravathi and Salkin delegates arranged themselves around a table that had been assembled so recently you could smell the fabrication materials. I had a field tablet on my knee. I filled out the standard forms: unit movement, tactical actions, outcomes. Under the outcome field there was a drop-down menu, standard options. It did not have an option for what had happened. I selected the closest one and typed an addendum. The addendum was 3 sentences long. I reread it and deleted 2 of them. The third sentence said, the engagement was resolved through interdiction of rear supply infrastructure and subsequent collapse of forward operational capacity on the Salkin side. I filed it. The negotiations lasted 22 hours. I was present for 6 of them, then rotated out so Ford could sit in. Vasari stayed the full duration, which I respected without saying so. The Salkin delegates were different from what I had expected. I do not know what I had expected. After 107 years, I think I had built them into something larger. In my mind, they were not large. They were a species that moved slowly and spoke with elaborate ceremony and smelled faintly of something metallic. And they were exhausted in the way that people are exhausted when they have been doing something for too long and knew it, and could not find the door. One of their senior delegates, whose name translated roughly as advocate Aaron, spoke to our section of the room. During a recess, the translation unit struggled slightly with their dialect. You fight, Advocate Aaron said, as though you wanted to finish. I looked at them. Yes, I said, that is how we fight. Advocate Aaron was quiet. Then they said something the translation unit rendered as we had forgotten that was a way to fight. I did not answer. I did not have an answer that would have helped. On the Dravathi side, the reaction was more complicated in the way of a structure that has been load-bearing for so long that removing the load does not feel like relief. It feels like the walls are not sure what they are for anymore. Vasari stayed close during the proceedings, not close the way a liaison does their job, close the way a person does who is processing something in real time and does not want to be alone while they do it. At the 18-hour mark during a recess, they sat down beside me in the outer corridor of the negotiation shelter. The corridor was plain and cold. We sat in silence for a while. My brother died in the Vorth conflict, Vasari said. I did not react. I stayed still. Year 73, they said. He was a signals officer. His position was in the eastern Sector 2, ridges north of Sector 7. I looked straight ahead. We were told it was necessary, Vasari said, that the defense of the ridge required sustained commitment, that the sacrifice had meaning. I said nothing. Was it, they said, necessary? One beat two. No, I said. The corridor was very quiet. We did not look at each other. The proceedings resumed. We stood up and went back in. Vasari found me at the 20-hour mark, looking like someone had pressed every expression out of his face and left it plain. The compact has scheduled a formal inquiry, he said. My authorization is under review. I know, I said. They're saying I exceeded operational mandates. You did, I said. He looked at me. You also ended a 107-year war, I said. He was quiet for a moment, then we ended it. No, sir, I said. You signed the authorization. That's the part that mattered. He did not argue. He was not the kind of man who argued with accurate statements. The inquiry is scheduled for the compact's next fiscal review cycle, he said, approximately 6 of our years out. That's a Thursday problem, I said. Vasari almost smiled, almost. Hour 48 came like all the hours before it, except that it was the last one with a number attached to anything. After that the count stopped. The front was silent. The fourth accords were being formally amended. The compact inquiry was filed and pending. The Drevasi Council had issued a statement describing the conflict's resolution as a strategic transition in terminology that was technically true and spiritually misleading, which was probably the best outcome available. I packed my field kit. It did not take long. I have never owned much. Things I carry are the things that survive bad decisions made by other people, and none of them are heavy. Kowalski found a vending unit somewhere in the forward base, which should not have been possible given that we were 6 light years from the nearest human civilian installation, and yet there it was. He came to the transport pad holding 2 bags of something that was pressed into small cubes and colored in ways that suggested flavor rather than delivering it. He handed one to each member of the unit. He kept one for himself. He did not make a speech. He did not say this is a victory, or we made history, or anything that required the word glory. He just handed out the bags and nodded once and started loading his gear. I ate 1 cube. It tasted like chalk that had watched a documentary about food. It was the best thing I had eaten in 4 days. Ford was the last one at the transport pad. She had stayed for the final hour of the negotiations and came out looking the way you look when you have watched something large and slow finally stop moving. She shook hands with me. Her grip was different from the grip she had given me when we first met. That first grip was holding on. This one was just a grip. What happens now? She asked. For the Drevasi. For us, she said. I thought about 6 other civilizations and their complicated situations. I thought about a compact inquiry scheduled for 6 years out. I thought about Vasari's career and the 29 protocol violations and the formal objection filed in 18 official categories. The compact files their paperwork. I said we go home, then they ask us about the complicated situations. And we help, she asked. We look at them, I said, which is all it usually takes. Ford nodded. She looked at the valley. One more time. The twin moons were visible again, same angle as when we arrived. The wrong light making shadows fall in directions they should not. I keep thinking about the depot, she said. Nobody guarded it. 107 years, and Nobody put a single defensive position between it and the rest of the conflict, because nobody thought anyone would go there. I said, "That's what I keep thinking about," she said. She got on the transport. I stood on the pad for one more minute. The valley below was the same valley it had always been, great churned ground. Between two slopes, two sets of fortified positions that had been hitting each other at the same coordinates for longer than most human governments had existed. 11 million names. 11 million names, and the line between them had moved 4 kilometers. I reached into my chest pocket. The notepad was there, folded the same way it had been since the briefing room. I took it out, unfolded it. The paper was worn at the creases from being folded and unfolded enough times. Line was still there, one curve simple. Around the ridge. A child could have drawn it. That was the thing I kept coming back to, not the supply corridor logistics, not the communication blackout, not the physics of what Kowalski did to 3 walls in sequence, the line, the simplest possible answer to the simplest possible question which nobody had asked for 107 years, because the question had stopped being a question, it had become a given. The ridge is the objective. The ridge is contested. The ridge cannot be taken. Nobody asks why you cannot go around a thing that everyone has agreed cannot be gone around. I put the notepad back in my pocket. I got on the transport. Kowalski was in the seat beside mine, working through his second bag of chalk cubes. He offered me one. I took it. We lifted off. The valley fell away below us, and then the ridge, and then the whole theater of the Vorth conflict was a patch of gray on a larger gray landscape on a planet that was getting smaller through the port window. I thought about Vether message. It came in at hour 46, just before the final signing. Personal frequency, no text, just an attachment of file names. Dravathi names from year 73 alone, just 1 year, just 1 year of 11 million. Compiled and transmitted in a single file with no message attached, no explanation, no contact, no demand for anything. I had opened it. I had read the first 3 names, then I had closed it. Not because I could not handle it, because I could, and that was almost worse. I kept the file. It was in my kit. I would read more of it when I was ready. Then more. It would take a long time. That felt correct. Some things should take a long time. The compact inquiry would cost Vesari his command, probably. He knew that when he signed the authorization. I did not know how to account for that in any ledger. I understood some costs do not have a category in the standard forms. Hale had already been reassigned. Quietly, sideways, the kind of reassignment that means no one is saying you were wrong in public, but also no one is inviting you to the next briefing. The 6 civilizations with complicated situations had, through the same back channel Vesari was not supposed to know about, made contact with the compact Human Integration Office. The office had forwarded the contacts to Earth's diplomatic corps. The diplomatic corps had, as of our departure, not yet figured out how to respond to them. They would. That was also a Thursday problem. And Thursday had a way of arriving. I looked out the port window. The stars were moving the slow way again, relative to fast. Kowalski said, "You're going to be okay." I looked at him. "When we get back," he said, "you're going to be able to just be there." It was a real question, from him all. Questions are real, he does not ask the other kind. I don't know, I said, probably. He nodded. That was enough for him, it was almost enough for me. I took the notepad out one last time. Looked at the line. One curve, around a thing everyone had. Decided was a wall, 48 hours, 107 years. 11 million names and 4 kilometers and one filing cabinet full of compact protocols and 29 violations, and the smell of recycled air in a briefing room, where someone above me had already decided my future. One line. I refolded the notepad, put it away. I kept it. I keep all the things that are true.